Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Welcome, friends. This is Dane Rome, your announcer for today's Last Days Beacon program. Thanks for listening, and thanks for joining us. And just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with Bible prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You'll find a donate link on the home page. The website address again is www.swpm.us. And thanks for your prayers and support for this faith ministry. Well, friends, I trust you're enjoying this series of interviews as Dr. Schnitger hosts L.A. Marzulli, who has become a regular guest on our program. L.A. Marzulli is one of the world's leading experts today on the subject of UFOs, extraterrestrials, alien abductions, and biblical giants known as Nephilim. His research has literally taken him around the globe and earned him guest spots on the History Channel, Coast to Coast Radio, and prophecy conferences around the world. Well, today he comes to discuss his latest film project entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception. It was 100 years ago, on October 13th, 1917, that 70,000 people gathered in a field outside the little town of what is now called Fatima, Portugal, in anticipation of seeing a vision from God. What they saw rocked their world and continues to reverberate today. Did they see an apparition of Mary, a solar anomaly, or something quite different and quite sinister? Was this a vision from God or a demonic deception? Well, Marzulli and his team traveled to Fatima recently to interview experts on the miracle of Fatima and examine eyewitness accounts of that event. What he discovered will shock and surprise you. These findings are the subject of today's program. I'll give more details at the end of today's program as to how you can obtain this brand new film. But now let's join Dr. Dave Schnitger as he continues his conversation with L.A. Marzulli about his brand new DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception.
Thank you, Dane. We are again joined today by L.A. Marzulli, all the way from the great state of California, soon to secede from our union, perhaps. But time will tell.
I'll be moving to Oklahoma. Thank you.
Yes, the socialist paradise of California. They say that that's the land of fruits and nuts. Certainly, L.A. is not one of those. We're glad to have him here in flyover country in Oklahoma City today to continue our discussion on his latest DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or Harbinger of Deception. Now, I've had the privilege of interviewing L.A. several times on some very interesting subjects, and this one is no exception. I certainly do not consider myself a Fatima expert, but as a result of viewing this DVD, I know more about what happened, the eyewitnesses' accounts, but what L.A. brings is a biblical and evangelical analysis that I think will perhaps help us to understand the times in which we live. And I think that's very important for us as believers today.
Absolutely.
That we have a discernment of our times, because if we're not discerning, we're deluded. There's really no neutrality in the world in which we live. We're either informed or we're misinformed. And L.A. is certainly a leading light in these matters. For many years, God has directed his path in direction of studying unidentified flying objects, extraterrestrials, the experience, actually a much more common experience than we might think, of alien abductions, Nephilim, fallen angels, and all of these wonderful, not so wonderful perhaps topics, exotic topics that tend to be avoided today, but are very much a part of last days realities. So, L.A., welcome back to our show today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We've had three, I think, very illuminating discussions so far about an experience that took place about 100 years ago, specifically in an open field outside of the little town that is now known as Fatima, Portugal, where 70,000 individuals gathered in anticipation of something that they'd never seen before. The word had gone out that there had been some appearances to some young children in Fatima on a monthly basis beginning in May of 1917. And the word was out that these appearances, apparitions they might be called, were to climax on October 13th, 1917. Mm-hmm. In anticipation of that, even before internet and flash mobs, 70,000 people from all walks of life, from professionals to peasants, gathered together in anticipation of an event that was to take place at midday. And we've already described some of the eyewitness accounts of this. Sadly, no photographic evidence is available at this point, but we have 28, as I recall, 28 eyewitnesses that in their own handwriting described what they themselves saw, heard, and felt. And so, my first question, L.A., we're talking about 1917. To this point in time, had there been other mass sightings of UFOs or other such phenomenon that might have influenced the eyewitness accounts?
I would have to say no to that. The eyewitness accounts, there was only one, I was a lawyer, I believe, who wrote in his own hand. Everyone else was talking and the interrogator was writing. But the lawyer wrote in his own hand what he had seen. So I just wanted to correct that. Mm-hmm. But there were sightings in America in the late 19th century, before the turn of the 20th century. And you go back in history, and there are other sightings, one over in Germany, there's a couple things in China, Japan. There were one in Texas in the 19th century. But nothing like this. Nothing like this, where 70,000 people are gathered.
So there was no widespread literature that may have informed or influenced?
Not at all.
So these were folks, it would be as if we were transported back to the medieval period, and we're standing out in a field, and all of a sudden we see a supersonic jet, a Concorde jet, flying over. We would have no idea what that was. Totally outside of our experience.
Completely.
So really, these folks were not influenced by prior knowledge, study, experience.
Nothing. There's nothing, and see, that's part of the problem. There's nothing that they can go to. Whereas today, in modernity, we've been enculturated with countless films and E.T. and Star Trek and Ancient Aliens on every Friday night. I mean, we are inundated with the idea that there's life out there, life in the universe, and we've been visited, ancient astronauts, and I don't believe that. I believe that, and the plurality of worlds, I don't believe in the plurality of worlds. I think that God's going to roll up this whole thing like a scroll. And I've been saying this at conferences over and over and over again. If we are really honest, intellectually honest, we have no idea where we are and what this is. No one does. Are we? If the universe is analogous to a continent of the United States, are we in Tampa? Are we in New York? Are we in Houston or Los Angeles? We don't know. All we know is we look out in this vast universe, and there must be life out here. It's not, not so fast, citizen. That just because it's huge does not mean that that there has to be life there. I mean, why do we think that? Because there must be. Well, no, we deal with a God who apparently is amazing, incredible, and spoke all this into existence. Jesus did it. Spoke it all into existence, and it's here. And we'll roll it up like a scroll. And if you don't find that troubling, see me after class, because it's incredibly troubling.
Right, it is.
So we don't know really where we are and what this is. But these entities who come in, are interdimensional entities. They are the fallen angels, in my opinion. They are part of the rebellion held under Lucifer. They have an agenda, and that agenda is one of deception. Deception. And this is the end times. All signs and lying wonders. That's why the film is called Miracle of the Sun, or a harbinger of deception, because I believe Fatima is a harbinger of what is coming. And when it shows up, that will cause the great deception.
Was this I think, perhaps we haven't stated it clearly, but from your investigation, was this the first mass appearance of a UFO?
In modernity, yeah.
Okay.
I think
in the modern era.
In the modern era, I think it's safe to say that because 70,000 people witnessed this.
Right.
This isn't, 2 or 3 people.
It's not an isolated camper out in the woods.
Not, yeah.
Okay. This was a mass appearance.
Yes.
And so, getting inside of Satan's mind, he certainly must have had an agenda.
He did.
And we'll be talking about that.
Sure.
And it has had an amazing impact, certainly within the realm of Catholicism, which, perhaps 1 billion adherents.
Yeah.
So in terms of impact over the last 100 years, Fatima is still a big deal. The faithful, Catholic faithful, continue to make pilgrimages to Fatima every year because of the event that took place on October 13th, 1917. So if Satan wanted to make an impact, he really did on that occasion. And perhaps my surmise, that was the beginning of an acceleration of these deceptive events in the modern era. This seemed to be the beginning, as we talked about last week, about other things that happened in 1917. The Balfour Declaration, the acceleration of the Aliyah, the emigration back to Israel in preparation for statehood, the Bolshevik Revolution, the large communist experiment, which of course is also a last days phenomena. All these things really kicked off in 1917. Well, when you went back to Portugal recently, obviously the eyewitnesses have long passed, but you met with some local Fatima experts and you interviewed them. Give us kind of a consensus of what their analysis of this event was.
Well, we met with people like Frederica de Armada, which is Fina de Armada's daughter. Fina passed away in 2014, so I always wanted to meet her. I'm just a few years too late to that, but it was great to sit down with Frederica, and we were in Fina's house, which is now Frederica's house, and she opened up everything to us. We had access to photographs. We sat in the dining room, just beautiful dining room, and she basically laid out what the research of her mother and how her mother was castigated for what she discovered. And I get it. It's controversial, and I understand that. But all Fina de Armada did was show what was there in the 1917 records. And the reason why she was looking for influential women of the 20th century. That's how she went to Fatima to get access to the records, because she was going to do a paper on influential women of the 20th century. And she thought the mother of the fourth witness would be someone to do this. And what's interesting is this woman who raised the money to put the chapel at Fatima, the original chapel, her daughter was the fourth witness, which remained hidden. Most people don't know this until Fina de Armada discovered her and then went and interviewed her. The fourth witness talks about seeing a blonde-haired boy or girl, not sure, long blonde hair, underneath the tree, who communicated with her telepathically. Months before Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta had their apparition.
So the appearance of this lady, unnamed lady, she didn't identify herself as Mary.
Never did.
Appeared separately to this fourth witness.
Yes.
In that same time frame prior to October 13th.
And also 2015, 2 years prior to the 1915, 2 years prior to the 1917 apparition, other children, including Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, and the fourth witness, and other children were seeing apparitions. What most people don't understand, because they haven't gone to Portugal like we did, and I remember sitting down there with one of the witnesses, Manuel, who's also a PhD, and he talked about the hundreds of apparition sites all throughout Portugal. We sat down with historians. Everybody had PhDs. I mean, everybody on record except for Frederica had PhDs after their name. These are highly learned men and women who come on the record in the film and discuss from the 1917 records what actually happened. And when you get some of these people, like what we went out with Dr. Manuel to another apparition site, we talked to historians like Joaquim Fernandez. It is a totally different story than what most people think that they know. Let me say something here, because I don't know whether we'll get to it or not. Most people have no idea. Lucia was 10 years old when she had these apparitions. Miracle of the Sun, and it remained very controversial. Francisco and Jacinta died 2 years later of the flu. They died. And I went to both their houses. They're still in existence and filmed there. And what most people, again, the official version of the story, most people have no idea that Lucia, at 16, was taken by the Jesuits, given a vow of silence, and hustled off to a convent. There are also no secrets in the original 1917 records. They're not there. There's not one mention, not one word in the 1917 documents about Russia or about consecrating Russia to the Sacred Heart of Mary. It's not there. It does not exist to the best of our knowledge. And all the researchers that we talked to, same thing. There's not one word about Russia or consecrating Russia to Mary's Sacred Heart. It's not there. This happens, and you can go on a Catholic website and look at this. I believe it's Fatima.org, but I could be wrong. And it's called The Timeline of Fatima. In 1928, 11 years after the 1917 apparitions, okay? Lucia is now 21 years old. She has been in the convent for a number of years. In 1928, she writes down the first 2 secrets. That's how all that comes down.
Okay.
That's how it comes down. Was she controlled? Is it a confabulation? You have to decide that for yourselves.
Right. Did she even write it herself?
Exactly.
We don't know.
We don't know.
And as I recall, she lived in the convent
She was cloistered.
For the rest of her life.
Cloistered with a vow of silence.
Right. So she
Why?
was. Yes. Interesting.
Why was that done?
So again, really, if we want to have an accurate understanding of what took place there in 1917, we have to go back to the eyewitnesses.
You got to go back to the eyewitnesses. You got to go back to the original documents of 1917. What did the witnesses say? Not 21 or 28 or because the further out you go, there's like 2 Fatimas,
Right.
or 3 Fatimas.
Right.
I mean,
there was the real Fatima, then there was a legend
Right.
that accrued afterwards,
Correct.
which is not necessarily trustworthy.
Correct. Well, in my opinion, it's not trustworthy at all.
Right. Well, we're going to end there today. Next week, I've kind of saved the best to last because we're going to talk about your interviews with some Christian scholars who've devoted many years to thinking and trying to understand from a biblical perspective this event. And then I want you to share what you think about the event and how it relates to the days in which we live today.
Absolutely.
There's a connection between 1917 and 2017. There is a continuum of events, and just as God has an agenda for the last days, so does Satan.
Sure he does.
And we want to understand how 1917 fits in with 2017. So folks, you'll need to come back. We have been talking with L.A. Marzulli. This is the 4th of 5 podcasts on the subject of Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or a harbinger of deception. And we're going to have our announcer, Dane Rome, share how you can obtain a copy of this fascinating DVD, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitger. You may obtain a copy of the DVD, Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or a Harbinger of Deception, for a gift of $19.95 plus shipping. To obtain your copy, simply go to the homepage of our website, www.swpm.us, to find the film. That website address again is www.swpm.us. Again, this film is available for your gift of $19.95 plus shipping. Please join us next week as we continue our discussion with L.A. Marzulli, brought to you by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Until then, this is Dane Rome. Thanks for listening.